At the start of the film, the dashing club's goalkeeper, Du Wang, was summoned for a meeting by a man named Mr. Jean. Mr. Jean offered him a large sum of money to deliberately ensure that the opposing team won the next match. Du's career had been struggling recently. He had been involved in several controversies over the past few years, such as injuring a player, which led to multiple match suspensions. He had even resorted to playing in the girls' team in disguise, serving food on his body, and engaging in various bizarre acts. Nevertheless, Du assured Mr. Jean that he was not for sale and promised not to let the opposing team score a single goal in the upcoming match. During the match, Du made a spectacular save but, due to overconfidence, ended up conceding several goals. His poor performance led the opposing team to mock him and celebrate triumphantly. This upset Du greatly, but a fellow player and best friend of his comforted him and took him to the coach. The coach humiliated him severely, stating that they had replaced him with a dog that played better. Sean John was furious and threatened to leave the team if his friend wasn't reinstated. The coach dismissed his threats, stating that the team would be fine without him. On their way home, a man pretended to get hit by their car while crossing the street. With their mood already soured, they grabbed him, hit him a few times on the car, and cleaned the windshield with his clothes. Just then, a girl named Shaju saw them and started a protest. The crowd ended up arresting them for beating the man. Mr. Jean bailed them out and revealed that he was not just a football coach. The meeting had been a test of their integrity. Mr. Jean took them to his office and introduced Du to Mr. Jean and Mr. Liv. They explained that Du's grandfather had a brother who had distanced himself from the family and recently passed away. The entire inheritance could now be Du's, but he needed to pass a test. He must spend 1.18 trillion yuan within a month to receive the remaining 30 billion yuan. The challenge also had some rules, such as not using the money in illegal ways, and the next part of the film, Du Wang was given strict instructions. By the end of the month, he must have no purchased items left, such as a house or a car. He was prohibited from giving money as gifts or donations. He could only employ up to 100 people, but they had to fulfill their duties. He was not allowed to deliberately damage any of his purchased valuables, and he could not buy anything for more than its market value. The final rule was that he could not disclose the details of this challenge to anyone. However, if he chose not to take the test, he could leave with 10 million yuan, leaving the rest of the money in a trust fund that Mr. Jean and Mr. Liv could use as they wished. Mr. Jean instructed his accountant to keep track of all Du's expenses. The accountant, Shah Juti, plotted to get Du imprisoned in revenge. Du immediately hired her. He then went to the bank with Sang Zhang to review his money. He had never seen such an amount before. As soon as the money was out of the vault, he began splurging. Du hired all the bank guards at high salaries. Next, Du approached his football team and announced that he was renting the best Chinese league club so that, after the stadium repairs, he could arrange a match between both teams. Upon hearing this, everyone laughed. To prove his point, Du dumped a JCB load of money onto the football ground. He also rented several cars and set off to a hotel with his entire team. On the way, he sat in a separate car with Shaju and began to annoy her. Shaju responded that it was all pointless. When they arrived at a luxurious hotel with restricted member access, Du and Sang Zhang paid the manager extra to rent the entire hotel for a month. The manager happily showed everyone to the dining room, and Du used his money to spend on his employees. The football team had effectively become his staff, so everything was in accordance with the rules. Du announced that he was starting an investment company, with Sang Zhang as the CEO. Sang Zhang was deeply moved, but he was unaware that Du had appointed him CEO solely because he believed Sang Zhang would squander all the money. Du was throwing money around with wild abandon. From lavish haircuts costing millions to renting expensive cars, furniture and clothing, he seized every opportunity to spend. Shaju warned him that if he continued such extravagance, all his money would be gone in 6 months, although he might stretch it to 5 months more. Meanwhile, Shaju's boyfriend, Janielo, arrived. He was about to give a lecture on how people shouldn't chase after money. Du pulled a large amount of cash from his safe and said, "Here, take the money and stop with the teaching nonsense. Come work for me as my assistant." Seeing so much money, Geniello eagerly agreed to become a personal assistant and happily indulged in a few drinks. Shaju, shocked by Duyu's behavior, decided to break up with him and left. At the first meeting of his investment company, Duyu instructed to pour money into sectors that were facing losses. Suddenly, a strange man barged in seeking funding for his bizarre invention. He had created a device that allowed people to float even on the ground. Predicting that this venture would definitely sink, Duyu provided him with substantial funding, where he funded every idea presented by the attendees. The next day, while Duyu was getting a massage, his famous patron made an attempt to have a physical encounter with him. He tried to fend her off, but the situation was quite uncomfortable. Just then, Shaju arrived and gave Duyu a chance to escape. The following day, Duyu met Mr. Jean and Mr. Liv at the golf course. He sensed that they were trying to find a way to disqualify him from the challenge. During lunch, where everyone enjoyed a lavish meal, Duyu served them instant noodles, adhering to the rule that he could only spend on his employees. Duyu then invited an American business strategist, Mr. Lafitte, to China with a hefty fee and asked him to suggest a business venture where all the money could be lost. The business coach rejected the proposal, stating that he only trains people for success, not for failure. Enraged, he left without eating. Duyu spared no opportunity to spend money. He arranged separate expenditures for every part of his body. During a meeting, he learned that the shares of the companies he had invested in were skyrocketing, and his investment firm was making a fortune. This news soured his mood. Meanwhile, Shaju was celebrating her birthday alone at home. Just then, Lu arrived and presented her with a bouquet of flowers. Shaju thought Lu had come to celebrate her birthday, but he was actually there to seek a recommendation for funding his idea. Annoyed, Shaju threw the cake in Lu's face and then went to Duyu, who was organizing a fireworks display to splurge money. The sky was filled with colors. Seeing this, Shaju expressed her happiness and told Duyu it was her birthday. Duyu, seizing the moment, said the fireworks were in celebration of her special day. The next day, Shaju saw that Duyu had put up posters all over the city, stating that she should give Duyu a chance to win her heart. The posters were also displayed on TV, radio, and hot air balloons. People began to treat Shaju like a celebrity and started taking photos with her. Shaju called Duyu to ask him to take down the posters, but he flatly refused. As Shaju was heading to the hotel, she noticed the same man who had prompted her to report Duyu to the police was now pretending to confront her again. This made her realize that Duyu was not lying. After meeting with Duyu, Shaju expressed her desire to understand him better. Duyu arranged a private concert at the hotel with her favorite singer performing. They enjoyed themselves thoroughly. That night, Duyu took her out for dinner, played football, and went for a romantic walk by the river. The following day, when Duyu saw his team partying instead of practicing, he inquired about the reason for their joy. They told him that their investment company had made a profit of 10 billion yuan. Infuriated, Duyu punched his team and then ran off to jump into a bridge. As the end of the month approached, Duyu realized that if he had even a single yuan left, he wouldn't get a penny. This sparked a new idea in his mind. He called a press conference to announce that he was launching an insurance scheme for overweight people. Under this scheme, anyone could register by paying just 1 yuan, and the company would give 1 yuan for every gram of weight lost. In other words, if someone lost 1 kilogram, they could receive up to 1,000 yuan. Anne and Lai were furious about this plan, but since insurance is a legal business, it was entirely legitimate according to the rules. People across the city started registering for the program and focused on losing weight. They began using stairs instead of elevators. Duyu was awarded Humanitarian of the Year, although he made it clear on stage that he was doing it solely for his personal gain, not for humanity. Everyone thought he was just putting on an act. On the day of the football match, the captain of the hentai club boasted that his team would score at least double digits against the so-called inferior team. Despite having few supporters, their team made a grand entrance by helicopter. As soon as the match began, Sang Wong faked an injury to get the Hentai Club's best player a red card. Nevertheless, Hentai Club scored 8 goals before halftime. To save his team's honor, Du instructed his players to ensure they did not lose by double digits under any circumstances. When the game resumed, Hentai Club scored another goal. The Dashing Club players gave their all in the match, determined not to let in 10 goals. Seeing their determination, even the opposing team's supporters began backing them. After the substitute ran out, the coach himself stepped onto the field to play but injured his back when he slipped and fell. He managed to prevent the opposing team from scoring 10 goals. After the match, a wave of joy swept through the spectators and the entire team. Following the match, Shaju received a phone call from an unknown person who claimed to have kidnapped her. He demanded $10 million by morning or he would kill Shaju. This put Du in a serious predicament. If he gave the money to the kidnappers, it would violate the challenge rules and he would fail the test. However, this was actually the final test set by his grandfather to determine if he would value human life over money. Mr. Jean was confident that Du would provide the money to save Shaju, but Du spent his time partying instead. By morning, when Mr. Jean and Shaju were leaving in disappointment, they found Du sitting on the stairs with the money, crying. The final video created by his grandfather was played, and Mr. Jean informed him that he had become the owner of $30 billion. Subsequently, Du traveled around the world and returned with a pregnancy. He decided to donate all his wealth but realized he needed to keep some money for the child. He started with a small list and added so many things to it that he ended up with no money left for donations.